You ever wonder what it feels like to watch someone you trust walk away down a trail and disappear like the sky swallowed them whole? What would you do if the person who knows the woods best vanished in front of you? My name's Alex Mercer. I run guided backcountry trips, day hikes, overnight treks, the kind of work that's more about reading weather and people than maps. I've been guiding in America's wild places for 12 years. This is a true story, not some spooky urban legend, but it sits in the weird space where real dangers start to feel supernatural. I'll tell you exactly what happened on a ridge trip last fall, and why so many guides and hikers aren't coming back the way they left. We were on a 3-day route through a ridge system in the eastern ranges. Lots of scrub, sudden drop-offs, thin phone signal. I'd led this loop before. Everything about it should have been routine. The group was solid. 2 weekend backpackers, a couple from the city, and a young man, Jacob, who'd just been certified as a seasonal guide and wanted to shadow me. He was confident, buttoned up, carried a prose pack, and calm energy. We left at dawn with sunshine and coffee, and that easy, false certainty guides live on. Halfway through day 2, the weather changed faster than the forecast had promised. A low, wet fog rolled up like a tide and smothered the ridge. Compasses behaved weirdly in that narrow bowl. Our phones dropped from 6 bars to nothing. People's watches blinked an error, and my GPS waypoint warped like it was being redrawn. I stopped to wait for the cloud to lift, thinking, electronics freak out sometimes in tight rock bowls. Then Jacob said casually, "I'm going to go check that bench up there, get a better view." He smiled and walked off the trail. He walked maybe 50 yards. The fog folded over him like a blanket. 1 second he was there, his headlamp light bobbing, and the next he wasn't. No crack of a fall, no shout, no rustle. He'd simply vanished from sight. We called his name. We whistled. For 20 minutes, everything in me did what it always does. Search, methodical and trained, until the gut told me this wasn't a normal, lost moment. People get separated, they wander off trail and are found. That's the reality of our job. But when a trained, experienced new guide disappears without a trace in broad daylight, something about it changes the skin on your neck. National Park Service data shows search and rescue incidents run into the hundreds at some big parks every year. Rescue teams are stretched thin, and incidents can go wrong very quickly. I want to be clear. Most missing hiker cases are just tragic and ordinary. People getting lost off trail, storms coming in, runs of bad decisions. In parks like the Smokies, wandering off the trail is the single biggest reason people go missing. Bad weather and surprise terrain do the rest. Those are real numbers and real reports you can read. They're not ghost stories. But real doesn't make it less terrifying when something about the landscape, microclimate, a steep couloir, sudden hypothermia, turns a single step into permanent absence. We put out a rope line and called the park rangers. Helicopters came. K-9 teams ran corridors. We did everything the books tell you to do. The thing most viewers don't see is how search and rescue becomes a funnel of hope into logistics. The clock keeps running, weather windows close, volunteers tire, batteries die. In the last few years, there's been a steady drumbeat of stories. Hikers who never returned, others found days later in places you wouldn't believe, and a public strain on rescue resources that's only increased. These aren't campfire myths. their headlines. Two factors made Jacob's disappearance feel otherworldly to us. First, the pattern. Electronics and compasses glitching, a local fog that seemed to hang like a curtain, and then a person cutting through it and not emerging. Second, the human physiology side. In extreme conditions, even healthy people can experience disorientation, sudden confusion, or a kind of short-lived dissociation. High-altitude cerebral edema and severe hypothermia can cause lucid people to make irrational choices. And those symptoms look to witnesses like acts of will rather than illness. People have described it as the mountain taking you, but science explains most of it. Still, the effect on those left behind. Absolutely terrifying. A week later, a volunteer team found a single boot wedged in a boulder field down the drainage. Then a camera with the last photo taken. Jacob, smiling, frozen mid-step, the fog behind him like steam. That's where the cold, clinical response ends and the human part begins. The weight of small objects. In other real cases, like the long, unsolved disappearances people still talk about, a boot, a jacket, a camera has been what broke a family's years of not knowing into something painfully concrete. Michelle Vanek's story, a hiker who vanished on a Colorado 14er and whose case reopened when a search team found belongings years later, shows how those small clues can become the only bridge to closure. This is the part no one hears on hiking blogs. Guides aren't immune. We misread a slope, a river crossing goes bad, a microburst hurls a tree, or someone's brain stops operating correctly after dehydration and exhaustion. The woods are unforgiving. There are also places where the coastline and bluffs make bodies unrecoverable for long stretches. Recent cases off the Sonoma coast highlight how quickly a short coastal bluff hike can become a search case and then a suspension of search. These are real documented events. They happen now. After Jacob vanished, teams filed reports, volunteers logged hours, and our shop got subpoenaed for our trip manifest, the bureaucratic tale that follows every tragedy. Families get calls they never want. Park officials post missing person flyers and hold press conferences. The human cost isn't just an entry in an incident log. It's ruined holidays, grief that doesn't stop, and a group of people who carry the memory forward into every future hike. Outside the news cycle, a discovery months or years later can bring relief and more questions at once. The headline ends, but the trauma doesn't. If you plan to hike anywhere, leave a trip plan with someone. Buy or rent a satellite messenger for remote trips. Know your group's limits, and practice turning back as a skill, not a failure. Don't fetishize going light at the cost of safety gear. Carry a map and a compass and know how to use them if your tech dies. Most backcountry tragedies are preventable with better planning and respect for the environment. That's not cinematic, but it's true, and it's what saves lives. Search and rescue teams and park rangers will tell you the same. Some nights I still wake thinking of Jacob's last smile in that camera frame, the ordinary expression before everything went wrong. It's the detail I replay because it proves he wasn't reckless. He was a good guide who trusted a place he thought he knew. That's the most unsettling part. The woods don't care how careful you are. They only care that the rules of the land were followed. Sometimes they aren't. And the cost can be a person who never comes back. If you found this video useful, or if you hike or guide, hit subscribe. I post real guides, stories, and safety breakdowns every week. And if you want a deep dive next, I'll break down how search and rescue actually runs, step by step, what we did, what we couldn't do, and the exact moments that decide whether a search ends in reunion or tragedy. Watch the next video. I'll link it at the end. Before you go, tell me, if someone you trusted walked out of sight and didn't come back, would you wait and call for help or chase them into the fog? Why? Comment below. I read every answer. Every year, millions of people hike the Appalachian Trail. It's America's backyard. But what if I told you that in one section, a few miles of well-worn path in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, there is something so profoundly wrong, so actively malevolent, that it can make a seasoned, professional trail guide simply disappear? Not lost, gone. And the terrifying part, it's still out there. Hey everyone, my name is Mark Peterson, and I'm a backcountry survivalist and wilderness historian. What that means is I spend most of my life researching, documenting, and frankly, experiencing the true dark underbelly of America's most isolated landscapes. I don't chase Bigfoot. I look for the places that feel actively wrong. And the story I have for you today, it's not a mystery. It's a terrifying account of something that happened in September of 2023 on the North Carolina side of the Great Smoky Mountains. It involves a trail guide named Ethan Hayes. This story isn't about finding Ethan. It's about what happened to the people who were with him right before he vanished, in front of their eyes. Ethan was a local legend, 29 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and he'd been guiding private groups through the Smokies since he was a teenager. He knew the trails like I know the back of my hand. He knew the weather, the wildlife, and every terrifying little local story. This group he was guiding, a family from Atlanta, were doing a 3-day, 2-night loop near the Clingman's Dome area, a section known for sudden fog and strange, heavy silence. Everything was completely routine until the second day, and that's when the real horror began. The first sign that something was haunted or deeply wrong was the silence. The Smokies are called that because of the natural bluish haze, but they're not silent. They're full of cicadas, birds, and the rustling of the wind. Around 4 p.m. on day 2, the family, the Millers, told me that the forest just died. A sudden, oppressive quiet descended, the kind of silence that feels less like an absence of sound and more like a massive, heavy pressure pushing all sound out. Ethan, the guide, immediately went on alert. He stopped the group. He radioed into the Park Service, just a standard check-in. His voice, they said, was the only sound. Clear, professional, cutting through the heavy silence. Then he heard a noise, a sound that the Millers later described as a wet, scraping gasp, like something huge was trying to breathe without lungs. It didn't come from the woods. It came from above. Now, Ethan was a man of logic. He thought maybe it was a falling branch, a distressed animal, or a freak wind. But the family, particularly the mother, Sarah Miller, said the look on Ethan's face was sheer terror. Not fear, terror. Like he was seeing something he knew shouldn't exist, something pulled from one of those scary local legends. Ethan made a split-second decision. We're running. Now. They didn't run back to the main trail. Ethan led them off the trail into a small, overgrown clearing he knew about, a place where the underbrush was too thick for an easy pursuit. He was trying to get them out of sight, banking on his knowledge of the terrain. As they scrambled, Sarah Miller looked back, and what she saw, what she and her daughter both swore they saw, is the core of this horrifying true event. She didn't see a bear, a mountain lion, or a person. She saw the air itself. About 20 feet back, hovering just above the forest floor, was a shimmer, like the air over hot asphalt, but cold, gray, and vibrating with an unnatural energy. It wasn't a figure. It was an absence of definition, a tear in reality that was roughly the size and shape of a human torso. And then that shimmering, vibrating space moved. It didn't walk. It drifted with unnatural speed and a jerky, almost impossible motion toward the clearing. Ethan, realizing what they were facing wasn't natural, pulled out his hunting knife, pushing the family behind him. He wasn't defending them against an animal. He was defending them against a supernatural predator. The Miller family watched as that distorted, shimmering area of air reached Ethan. They heard no scream, no struggle, just the sound of a heavy leather pack hitting the dirt. In one sickening, instantaneous moment, the shimmering expanded, enveloped Ethan completely, and then it snapped back. The distortion was gone. The wet, scraping gasp was gone. Ethan Hayes was gone, vanished. What makes this a truly terrifying real-life horror story is what happened next. The Millers were left alone, deep in the Smoky Mountains. They didn't have a map. They didn't have a compass. They had a radio, which they used to call for help, their voices cracking with genuine, absolute hysteria. Park rangers and search and rescue swarmed the area. This was a massive, high-profile search in the USA. A local guide, a professional, had gone missing with witnesses. They searched for 2 weeks. Every inch of that quadrant was covered. They found the heavy leather pack. It was lying exactly where the Millers said Ethan dropped it. Inside, his ID, his satellite phone, his first aid kit, and his water bottle, all intact. They found his knife, stuck handle down into the dirt, as if he had planted it there as a final, desperate marker. But they found no trace of Ethan Hayes. No blood, no torn clothes, no footprints leading away, nothing to suggest he'd been attacked by an animal or fallen down a ravine. The official report, after 2 weeks of exhausting the budget and manpower, was an unexplained disappearance. Privately, the rangers I spoke with used words like impossible and unsettling. They knew Ethan. They knew he didn't just walk away. The Millers were heavily questioned. Naturally, they were initially dismissed. A shimmering, a tear in the air. People thought they were covering up a tragedy or had a shared psychological break. But their stories never wavered, and their trauma was palpable. They weren't just sad. They were frightened down to their bones. They saw something supernatural and utterly horrifying take a man from the earth right in front of them. And that shimmering, that localized, actively malevolent distortion in the fabric of the woods, the locals have a name for it in hushed, scary tones. They call it the silent grasp. They say it's not a ghost, it's a hole, a place where things that shouldn't be here can reach through and pull things or people back with them. This isn't just a story about a missing guide. It's a chilling, true account that leaves a few undeniable facts. A professional vanished instantly. Witnesses saw something unnatural, a terrifying force. and the evidence is confined to a heavy pack and a stuck knife. The Millers never returned to the mountains. Ethan Hayes is still officially listed as a missing person. But out there, in that little clearing in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, that silence is still waiting. That patch of air is still too quiet. If stories like this, stories that prove the supernatural, doesn't just lurk in old mansions, but right off a heavily traveled USA trail, if these stories both fascinate and frighten you, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. We dig into the real documented horror stories the news won't touch every single week. And if you want to dive deeper into the kind of realistic horror that happens in the wilderness, click on the video popping up on your screen now. It's my breakdown of the truly haunted area near Mount Rainier, where people report hearing voices that mimic their own. Trust me, it'll keep you up. The Millers heard a wet, scraping gasp just before the silent grasp took Ethan. It was trying to breathe. It was trying to exist. My question to you is this: if that thing, that terrifying hole in reality, needs to breathe to exist, what do you think it needs to eat? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.